Nadleh Whut'en. This is the historical story segment of the Memory Keepers and Storytellers YouTube channel. We'd like to thank you for tuning in. And we're just going to be reading to you today from the American Folklore Society, circa 1930s. So this is from a guy named Diamond Jenness. This is called Myths of the Carrier Indians of British Columbia. Because this is a 1930s document, they say things like Indians instead of indigenous, because that was the language they were using back then. So please excuse that. And we're going to get into this. This is the Journal of American Folklore, volume 47, from Diamond Jenness. And the first story I'm going to read to you is from, as it says, Fort Fraser, but it's not the Nadleh Dakelh people, so the Yinka Dene people is the origin of this story. And it's called The Giant's Grandson, or the Salmon Boy. So here we go. The Giant's Grandson, or the Salmon Boy, Fort Fraser. A boy and his sister with a boy cousin went out into the woods one day to hunt squirrels. They found many squirrels playing in the branches of the big trees in the heart of the forest, and the boys, standing on opposite sides, shot at them with their arrows. One squirrel came racing down the tree towards the ground, causing the girl to laugh aloud. The squirrel ran up again, and her brother, who was on the point of shooting at it, scolded his sister for frightening it away. Again, the squirrel ran down the tree. The girl wasn't able to control her laughter. However much her companion scolded her, she laughed and laughed until she died. The boys then became very frightened. They scooped out a hollow in a tree to serve as a coffin, placed the body inside, and covered it over with earth. Being afraid to return home, they wandered aimlessly about the woods. After several days, they came to a hole in a mountain near which lay a fir tree. One of the boys set fire to the tree, and the smoke from the fire tainted his body. Then they entered the cave, and in spite of the snakes, frogs, and other creatures that lay in their path, pushed on until they emerged into the open air, in a country that looked the same as this earth. In front of them was a good road marked with tracks of bare feet, men's, women's, and children's, all leading south. The boys wandered down the road to a big river, on whose opposite shore was a town divided into two portions. On one side, all the houses and canoes were red, on the other black. The black houses were the homes of the dead, the red of the robins, which dwell on earth during the day and depart to the underworld at evening. Standing on the banks, the boys shouted for someone to come and ferry them across, but no one heard them, though people were wandering as thick as mosquitoes to and fro among the houses. For a long time then, the boys remained on the bank, unable to make themselves heard. At last, one of them became sleepy and yawned. Immediately, a man on the far side shouted, "Someone is calling to us from the other bank." Two canoes came speeding across the river, one black, the other red. The black canoe arrived first, and a black ferryman landed on the shore. The smoky boy embarked, but when the boy, whose body bore no taint of smoke, stepped into the canoe, his foot went right through the bottom, and he had to remain behind. But now, as the canoe pushed out into the river, its four paddlers began to sniff their passenger's body, and one of them said to his companions, "It is strange that this boy has no taint of death." They pushed him back and forth from one to the other, saying, "No smell," until he was reduced to skin and bones and fell dead. Then they threw his body overboard into the river, where a big sturgeon swallowed it. Meanwhile, the boy who had remained on shore was weeping at his cousin's fate. He longed to go back home and searched for the cave from which he had emerged. At last he found it, but it was now so full of frogs that he had to crawl on hands and knees. At intervals he heard a voice, and the path was enveloped in darkness, for a giant at the far end of the cave kept placing his hand over the entrance. The boy groped his way for a long time, although when he and his cousin had passed through before, the path had seemed very short. At last he reached the end of the cave and sprang out onto his feet. Confronting him was a huge giant as big as a tree. The boy was terrified, but the giant said, "Come with me, my boy, I am your grandfather." He tucked the boy under his arm inside his blanket and carried him to his home, which two animals, a wolf and a wolverine, were guarding after the manner of dogs. The boy remained there for many days with the giant, who gave him plenty to eat, though he ate nothing himself. One day the giant said to the boy, "Go and see where the rabbits are, so that I may set snares for them." The boy searched all around the place, seeing no rabbit tracks, but many herds of caribou. On his return, he said to the giant, "I saw no rabbit tracks, grandfather, but there were plenty of caribou tracks and caribou." "Yes, yes," the giant answered, "they are rabbits. Make me some arrows before I go." The boy made some arrows of the size of an ordinary man would use, but the giant threw them outside, saying, "They are no good, they are too small." The lad then cut down some big trees and sharpened their tops. These satisfied his grandfather. In the morning, they went out to capture the caribou. From one side of the mountain to the other, the giant made a fence of tree trunks, leaving gaps here and there in which he set snares. He stationed the boy near the fence, telling him to shoot with small arrows any caribou that approached him. The giant himself went around behind the caribou and with his shouts drove them towards the fence. They came in countless numbers. Many the boy shot, and many were caught in the snares. Afterwards, the giant himself came up with many caribou, some strung like rabbits to his belt, others wrapped inside his blanket. He carried them all home and skinned them, stripping off their hides as an ordinary man strips the skin from a rabbit. Since he had eaten nothing for many days, he cooked a score of caribou on stakes in front of the fire and ate them all at one meal. He even reproached the boy for eating only a small part of one caribou set aside for him. The next day, the giant said to the boy, "Over in that direction are many big wolves. Go and see if you can find them." The boy went out and saw many shrews, but no wolves. He killed a shrew with his snowshoe, threw the body into the bushes, and, returning to camp, told the giant what he had seen and done. "It is my grandfather that you have killed," said the giant. "Did you not see any big wolves?" "No," answered the boy. "There were none." "That is strange," said the giant. "There have always been wolves around here. Tomorrow I'll go and look myself." The next day they went out together, and the boy showed him the tracks of the shrews. The giant made camp on the spot, took a stick, and tried to lever over the shrew that the boy had killed. He could hardly roll it over. So the boy picked it up in his fingers and threw it into the camp. "How strong you are," said the giant, who proceeded to skin and cook it. The first day he ate one leg, the second day another leg. It was 5 days before he could consume the whole shrew. Meanwhile, the boy ate the rest of his caribou. They remained for some time in this place. Then the giant said, "There are 2 big beaver living somewhere over yonder. Go and find out the place and I will kill them." The boy skirted a large lake without finding any trace of beaver or their houses. But on a big mountain nearby, he saw many fallen trees scored as with an axe. He returned to the giant and said, "Grandfather, I saw no big beaver, but there were many fallen trees covered with claw marks as though they had been chopped with an axe." "Those are beaver marks," the giant replied. "Tomorrow I will go and kill them." Next day they went to the big lake, the giant carrying a huge pole. He planted the pole in the ice and set the boy on top of it, saying, "When the walking stick shakes to and fro, call me, for a big beaver will be gnawing it." Then he went up onto the mountain and stamped around. Soon the stick began to shake, and the boy shouted to the giant, "Grandfather, come, a huge beaver is gnawing through the pole." The giant rushed up and killed it. "There is still another," he said, and he stamped around on the mountain again. The pole shook a second time, and the giant, called by the boy, killed the second beaver. "Now, we will go home," he said. "There are never more than 2 beaver together." When they reached camp, he chopped off the tails of the beaver and threw one to each of his watchdogs, saying, "These are not good to eat." But the boy caught one tail and cooked it for himself. When it was ready, he said to the giant, "Grandfather, open your mouth. I want you to taste this." "Then tie yourself to that tree before you throw it," answered the giant. The boy lashed himself securely to the tree and threw the beaver tail. Only the lashing saved him from being engulfed with it in the giant's maw. "What was that choice meat you gave me?" his grandfather asked. "It was one of the beaver tails you cut off and threw to the dogs. The other one they have already eaten." The giant seized his huge walking stick, smote his dogs on the back, cutting them in 2, took out the beaver tail and swallowed it. Then he put the halves of the dogs together again, and they sprang up alive. The bodies of the 2 beaver he ate at one meal. One day the giant said to the boy, "Go and see if there is a big man fishing through the ice of the lake." The boy walked all over the lake, but saw only a large island with one big tree standing up in the middle, a dry tree without limbs. He went back and told the giant, "I saw no man fishing on the lake, only a large island with one big limbless tree standing up in the center." "That is the man," answered his grandfather. "You thought it was an island? It is a man, and the tree is his fishing pole. Come with me tomorrow. I am going to kill him. While we are fighting, go behind him and chop his legs with an axe." Next day they went together to the lake, and the giant and fisherman fought against one another. The fisherman was the stronger, and would have killed the giant if the boy had not cut his enemy's leg and caused him to fall to the ground. The giant then killed him and pushed him through the hole in the ice. Up to this time, the giant had drunk nothing, despite his enormous meals, but now he said, "I want to drink." And stretching himself flat on the ice, he drank and drank all day until the water in the lake was drained and the ice suddenly collapsed. Then they went home. On the following day, the giant said, "Yesterday I killed that big man. Now go and see if you can find his wife." The boy walked all around the lake, but saw only a long ravine and a mountain. He returned and told his grandfather, who said, "That is a woman, not a mountain. Tomorrow I will go and fight her, but you must stay at home and take my copper walking stick. If tomorrow rain should fall in large drops like fish, one side white and one side red, you will know that the woman has killed me. Then flee to your own country, or she will come and kill you too. Before you start out, hold up my copper walking stick and let it fall. Your home will lie in the direction in which it points. If you are hungry on the journey, let the stick fall again, and it will point in the direction of game, which you will find not far from its tip. Finally, when you draw near your home, fasten the stick to the top of a big tree where no one can see it and leave it there." Early in the morning, the giant went away to fight the woman, leaving the boy in camp. After a time, rain began to fall, huge drops, half red and half white. The boy, instead of going straight home, went to find out what had happened to his grandfather. In the place where he had seen the ravine, there was now a smokehouse inhabited by 2 women and 2 boys. His grandfather's body, cut in 2 at the waist, lay half on one side of the house, half on the other, and the boys were shooting their arrows into each half alternately. At this sight, the giant's grandson became filled with anger. He killed the 2 boys, took their arrows, and shot also the 2 women. He placed the bodies of the boys between those of the women, piled logs across them to form a funeral pyre, placed his grandfather's body on top, and burned them all. Then he went home, weeping. But to this day, you can see the giant's body at a place known as Quanchaz, south of Francois Lake. There stands a mountain divided into 2 that looks like a man with 2 small lakes forming his eyes. Now, the boy, remembering his grandfather's words and guided by the copper walking stick, set out for his own country. When he was hungry, he let the stick fall and, circling around its point, found a big black bear in its den. He killed it, cut off a small portion of the meat for himself, and threw the rest away. Other bears he killed in the same manner whenever he had need. After a long time, he came to the place where his sister had died of laughter. There he climbed a tall tree and fastened his stick to the top where no one could see it. Then he went on to the village. Now his father and mother had become very poor since the loss of the 3 children, and spent nearly all their days in weeping. When the boy arrived and stood outside the house, his younger sister, who was playing there, ran in to tell her mother. But the mother would not believe her and beat her with a stick, saying, "Why do you tell lies? Your brother has been dead for a long time." The girl went outside to cry, but, seeing her brother still standing there, she ran in again and told her father. "Are you sure it is your brother?" the father asked. And the little girl answered, "Yes." Then the mother went out and found the son whom she had believed dead. Both she and his father wept for joy. The boy remained for a time in his parents' house, going out only rarely. At last he began to notice that there was no young men in the village, only girls. And he asked his mother, "What has become of all the young men?" "There is not a single one left in the village." His mother answered him, "You were away so long that they all died." He knew, however, that she was concealing something, and one day he called to his little sister, "I am going to shoot some ducks. Come with me." They went out together, and the boy shot a swan. Then he asked the little girl, "Where did all the young men go?" "I don't know," she answered. "I have never seen any young men." "If you do not tell me, I will kill you," her brother said, and stringing his arrow, he shot her in the little finger. The girl was terrified and said, "All the young men went away to the sky to see Sa's 2 beautiful daughters and never returned." "Ah, now I know," the boy answered. "I'll depart at once, and you can go home alone." He handed his sister a small wisp of the swan's down and said, "Lie down and blow this down into the air. As it ascends, I will ascend with it." The girl blew the down into the air, and the boy floated up into the sky while his sister went home to tell her parents. The boy discovered a small hole in the sky, and passing through it found a good country like that he had left below on earth. Okay, we're going to stop there today. I'm going to continue this story in the next segment of the historical stories from the Dakelh people, Yinka Dene. So thank you for joining us in this segment, and we hope to see you next time. Snachailya.